Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our ninth annual St. Croix Youth Summit. My name is Katrina Schlicker. I'm the Environmental Education Coordinator for Wild Rivers Conservancy. Wild Rivers Conservancy is the official nonprofit partner of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. We work to inspire stewardship to forever ensure the rare ecological integrity of the St. Croix and Namakagon Riverway. Our theme this year is Swim into Science, Hooked on the Riverway. With the passage of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act in 1968, the pristine wilderness that makes up the St. Croix and Namakagon rivers was protected, providing wonderful habitat for over 100 native species of fish and 41 freshwater mussels. Fish are not only a meaningful part of the river ecosystem, but also provide a world-class fishing experience for new and experienced anglers. Over the next week, we'll learn about the amazing fish, the crazy lives of freshwater mussels, how rivers have impacted people's lives, and other stories from amazing professionals. I hope that this year's St. Croix Youth Summit will inspire you to take what you learn back to your communities and find ways to take action. We're excited to have over 400 students joining us from all over the watershed, including Amory, Hayward, and Stillwater. This program wouldn't be possible without the National Park Foundation's Open Outdoors for Kids grant program, wonderful work from the rangers at the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, and donations that support our Rivers Are Alive program for years to come. Before we begin, I would like to mention a couple of housekeeping notes. On the right of your screen, you'll see the chat box, or you might have to press the button at the bottom to see it on the right. To keep things simple, chat is where we would like you to share your questions and comments. If you have any questions during the presentation, we encourage you to just type those into the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Just so you're aware, this session is being recorded and will be made permanently available on the Wild Rivers Conservancy YouTube account. So with that housekeeping out of the way, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Ranger Mike.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katrina. And can you all hear me okay? Awesome. And is there a big picture that says Junior Ranger Angler on your screen? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. My name is Mike, or Ranger Mike, and I am a park ranger for the National Park Service. Today, we're going to learn all about the Junior Ranger Angler program here at St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. But to start, I want to ask you all, when you hear the words National Park Service, what do you think of? For some of us, we might think of the Grand Canyon, Everglades, Yellowstone. There's so many different national parks. The Colorado River carved out the Grand Canyon, giving us these beautiful views. You might think of Sequoia, where there's trees big enough where you can drive a truck or a car through them. And all across our country, we have 63 different types of national parks. But it's far more than just these big wilderness national parks. There's areas that are national battlefields, national preserves, historic sites, monuments, lake shores, scenic trails, and where I work, the National Wild and Scenic Riverway. We think about where we are right now. Some of you might be in Minnesota, where there's national parks like Grand Portage, Pipestone, Voyagers, or the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area. Could be in Wisconsin, where you have the Ice Age National Scenic Trail, Apostle Islands, and right where I am right now, St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. St. Croix National Scenic Riverway protects not only the St. Croix River, but also the Namakagon River. As a park ranger, it's my job to help others learn about the plants, animals, and history of these areas. If we look at a map of our two rivers, you have the Namakagon going from northern Wisconsin, from Cable to Hayward, Trigo, and then feeding into the St. Croix River. The St. Croix River heads down Wisconsin, forming the border between Wisconsin and Minnesota, before it empties out into the Mississippi River. We have a ton of different types of wildlife here. The forest around the river might hold bear, deer, squirrels. Flying overhead, we could have robins, ravens, and eagles. But today, we're going to learn about an animal that lives in the rivers, swimming around the bottoms, maybe at the tops, in schools and packs all together. But these are going to be a really neat way for us to understand the fish of the riverway. Today, as we explore, we're going to all become Junior Ranger anglers. By the time this program's over, you will all be sworn in as official Junior Ranger anglers, but that's a lot of words. So we're going to break it down. What's a Junior Ranger angler? An angler is described as one who fishes with a rod and a reel. And a junior ranger angler is one who respects fish, fish habitats, and protects nature, is a role model for safe and smart fishing practices. So by the time we're done, you are all going to be official junior ranger anglers. But to start, I want you to look at these pictures. There's 5 different animals shown here. What do you think they all have in common? From a seahorse to a great white shark, a moray eel, a ray, and a bass. Well, they all live in the water. Some of them live in salt water, some in fresh water. But what if I were to tell you that all 5 of these animals are considered fish? That gets a little bit confusing. So to start, we have to figure out what makes a fish a fish. So let's take a look at one of the fish we have here in the riverway. This fish is called a red horse. We look at it, it kind of looks fishy. It has fins, it has scales, but we break it down. What makes a fish a fish? There's a few different things that really stand out. These fish all live in the water. So another way to say that is aquatic. And they all have a structural system that holds their body together. Some might have a skeleton that's made of bone, some have cartilage. But another way to say it is they're aquatic vertebrates. Those are 2 big words. So aquatic, they live in the water, and vertebrates, they have some type of spine. You all feel the back of your neck. You might feel some bumps there. Your vertebrae, that's part of your spine. So these fish are that same way. They have that spine that holds their shape all together. And they live in the water. So in order to survive in the water, they need a way to get oxygen. I want you all to try to take a deep breath and out. We used our lungs. We breathed in air, our lungs absorbed oxygen, and we exhaled. Well, fish don't have lungs, so they have another way of getting oxygen to their body. Just by their cheeks, they have these flaps that can open, and hidden underneath are these little red things here. Those are called gills. As water rushes over those gills, fish are able to absorb oxygen out of the water. They're almost the opposite of us as humans, because if you take them out of the water, there's no water and oxygen going over their gills. And for us, if we put our head in the water, we can't get a breath of air. So it's always make sure when fishing to be careful when handling fish out of the water. They need that water to be able to absorb oxygen to the rest of their bodies. But it's not just gills. They need a way to move around. It's pretty rare to see fish with arms or legs or running around because they're swimming. So every fish has some types of fins. Most of them will have a tail fin, but some of them will have other fins. A dorsal fin on its back, almost like a shark. They might have fins right down by their chest, pectoral fins that help them with turning, going up and down. But that tail fin is one of the most important because that's how they move forward. We look at this sturgeon scurrying away. It's whipping its tail back and forth, allowing it to propel forward, almost like a way of running through the water. A good way to think about it is if you have ever gone swimming and put flippers on your feet, that rubber or plastic that you kick your legs allows you to move faster through the water. It's almost like you have 2 tail fins on your feet, allowing you to move forward at quick speeds. For fish that are big and long, they'll use some of their other fins to help turn and maneuver around the water. For fish that are small, like this small little rock bass, it's a fish known to be able to quickly turn around in different directions, darting away from predators that might want to try to eat it. And they have protection from some other things as well. All fish will have a type of scale on their body. I like to think of the scales as almost plate armor. It allows them to move around in areas without getting scratched or cuts from rocks or sticks. Some scales are large, like the red horse here, and some are very small and will feel smooth. And we'll see that later on with fish like catfish or sturgeon. So those scales really protect them. And as they're living in the water, getting oxygen through their gills, using their fins to propel themselves forward, and protection from those scales, they have other types of senses that allow them to survive in these aquatic environments. We have senses like smell, taste, sight, hearing, and touch, but fish have another sensory system. We call it a lateral line. So if we look at this brook trout here and we zoom in close to it, you'll notice there's a line that goes all the way down its body. That line allows it to feel movement of water around them. So if you have a small little fish swimming around here and a bigger fish behind it, any movement it makes, both those fish can feel that water movement and know that there's something behind it. If there was someone standing behind me right now, I don't have a lateral line. I wouldn't notice them behind me. But because these fish have that lateral line, they can feel the water movement. They can sense what's around them using that system. So all fish have some type of vertebrae. They get oxygen through their gills. They use their fins to move around. They're protected with scales, and they have a different sensory system called the lateral line. So now we're going to meet some of the fish that live throughout St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. The riverway has around 100 different species of fish. Some are tiny little fish, only a few inches long. Some get large, 6 to 7 feet long, and they all come in different shapes and sizes. You might have some that live at the bottom of the rivers and lakes, feeding through the muck and sand, looking for small little snails or macroinvertebrates. You might have some small fish that all like to school together for protection, hiding in the tall grasses and vegetation. And there's so many different environments that they can live in throughout the riverway that I picked out a few different fish to highlight some of these really important ones. So we'll start with the lake sturgeon. This is a really important fish for St. Croix National Scenic Riverway because one of the rivers we protect, the Namakagon River, actually means home or spawn or place of the sturgeon. This is a fish that is ancient. It's been around since the time dinosaurs were here, and they can live for over 100 years. We're going to watch a quick little video from the Duluth Aquarium that talks a little bit about these fish as they live at the bottom of lakes and rivers. They feed on small little worms, snails, and macroinvertebrates that are hidden in the sand and dirt. And they utilize what look like whiskers or their barbels to feel around for that food. But if we watch their mouth, it kind of goes down to be able to pick up their food. They don't have teeth, so they pretty much suck up those small little foods and swallow it down. Those barbels or whiskers can feel around in the muck for any type of food, and they have a very smooth touch to them as their scales are very small. These are fish that can grow to large sizes and for a long time, over 100 years long. And since they've been around for so long, we like to think of these fish as living fossils. Even just looking at them, the spikes on the back, the unique shape, and the elongated body, it's almost like we have dinosaurs still around us today. And I mentioned they grow to large sizes. Here in Wisconsin, the largest lake sturgeon ever was found. It was 7 foot 3 inches long, 240 pounds, and estimated to be about 125 years old. It took 3 staff members from the Wisconsin DNR to gently lift it up for this photo. They tagged it and re-released it back into the water. And it's still swimming around to this day. Other fish that can get that big, but are a little bit harder to find, like the muskellunge or muskie. This is a fish we like to call the fish of 10,000 casts because it could take a fisherman 10,000 casts before they catch one of these large predator fish. It's an ambush predator, meaning it likes to hide in the grasses and vegetation of water, maybe in a downed tree, hiding amongst the logs, waiting for a smaller fish to swim by. It can swim 30 miles per hour, quickly swimming at the fish and grabbing it in order to swallow it. You can see in this image, the fish has a large jaw on the bottom that kind of juts out. And along that jaw are some sharp teeth. So it is a fish that we need to be careful around its mouth. It's very famous in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And just up the road from where I'm sitting right now is the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame, where there's a 100-foot long muskie statue that you can actually crawl and walk inside of to take photos. It's a fish that is very unique, but very elusive, hard to catch. But if you do go out fishing for these predator fish, you do want to be careful around its mouth. You can see this fisherman holding and supporting its body with one hand, and his other hand is not near the teeth, but along the jaw on the bottom, being able to hold it in place for a quick photo before releasing it back into the river. We see these fish in the St. Croix River and in the Namakagon River. But if we follow the Namakagon River all the way up north, the water gets a little shallower and a little bit colder, we might run into a fish species called the brook trout. This is a cold water specialist, a fish that thrives in colder, chilly waters. It needs unpolluted waters because it's got very sensitive skin, meaning it can absorb materials through its skin. And if you are holding this fish, you want to make sure your hands are wet before you do so, because all of our hands have oils on them that can be transferred to the fish. By getting them wet first, it protects that fish. They like the cold water, and we typically find them in areas where you have a large stream and a smaller cold stream coming into it. They'll be hiding away in shaded areas looking for their next meal. And they like to eat a variety of different things, but one of the main food sources they have are insects, even flying ones that might be flying just above the water. These fish can launch themselves out of the water to grab a dragonfly, a bee, or any other type of insect before going back into the water with their meal. They have a really beautiful color to them. And in the spring, they typically start to turn a dark color on their back, so almost a black-like color. Their bellies can get this beautiful orangish red color. And if you notice, this fish has these almost polka dots of red with the blue circle around it, all down its side. It's a fish that we see a lot of people utilizing fly fishing for, as they try to mimic that insect with their lure, casting it above them, hoping that that fish will jump up and grab that lure for them. And another fish that people like to fish for are bass. Bass are fish that are opportunistic. They want food that will fit into their mouth and that is readily available to them. It's a fish that many people like to fish for, and it's a game fish. We see them in all sorts of different sizes, from tiny to getting up to a few pounds and a few 20, 25 inches long. It's a fish that has a few different varieties. You might see smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, but both of them try to get food sources that they can fit into their mouth. They might eat at the bottom, like crayfish. They might look up top for frogs or even smaller fish swimming around. And it's a fish that many people enjoy going out for along the St. Croix and Namakagon rivers. And the final type of fish we're going to talk about is kind of a general type of fish, the freshwater sunfish. These fish come in a few different varieties. This one is called the green sunfish, and you can see along its cheeks, it has these little blue markings, and then speckled around its body, it also has that almost blue coloring. If you look at the fin on the top, it's almost a little bit spiky, and it can be folded backwards. Similar to this, you have bluegill, a lighter color, it's that same size, about fit in your hand, and all along its cheek, right in where its gills are, is blue, hence the name bluegill. And the last one is called a red ear. This one still has that blue coloring, but if you look right here, you can see that small little red mark. That gives it the name the red ear. These sunfish all have that protection of that fin on its back that can be sharp. So if handling any of these fish, you want to make sure you take it from the head and gently press those spines back so they don't poke you. They can be sharp and it can be painful if it does poke you. So in doing so, you're pressing the spine back or the dorsal fin back, allowing those spines to be laid flat rather than sticking up towards your hand. All three of these fish, you'll commonly hear people call panfish because they can fit in the size of a frying pan, and people do like to eat them for fish fries. But with all these different fish, they can be found in the bottom, the top, hiding in the weeds, in all different types of bodies of water. And being a junior ranger angler also means you need to be able to protect fish habitats. Along the river, you'll find areas with tall grasses and vegetation. This allows for fish to hide and be protected from others. It allows fish to hide and ambush or go after their food sources. But it also gives them places where some of the fish will eat some of the plants. It's almost like their vegetables or vegetation they eat. You might find areas that have big rocks and boulders. This allows those fish to have a place to hide. In this picture alone, you have a bluegill swimming here, kind of in the middle of the river. Right along the bottom of these boulders, there's a bass. And then way off in the distance, we can just see another fish here. I like to think that the fish can find areas that they can hide in, almost their own little cave or rock formation to stay away from predators, but also have a place that they're safe and protected. As you're moving down the river, you'll also run into areas that don't have much vegetation, don't have much rocks, but do have sand or mud at the bottom. And that's a lot of the places we'll find catfish or those lake sturgeon we talked about before. They utilize those barbels, almost like whiskers, to feel around in the sand and the mud, looking for snails, dragonfly larvae, worms, in which they can use that mouth that goes down to pick up their food sources and have a meal. But all of these different types of areas allow so many different species of fish to live throughout the riverway. If we look at this picture of the Namakagon River, you can see there's a few trees down into the water. This is a great habitat for these fish. Those trees that fall into the river and the branches that go all the way down to the bottom allow fish places to hide. It gives them structure that they can feel protected in. You look at this diagram, you have weeds and plants growing on the side, lots of logs along the bottom and on the kind of down slopes of the river, and you'll find fish in a variety of places. The top, the middle, and the bottom, depending what they eat, what's protecting them, and what they're looking for. You do get a chance to visit our visitor centers. We do have lots of different diagrams and displays showing these different ecosystems. The Namakagon River Visitor Center has a big mural that shows above the river with the forest and sky, and then below the river, where you'll have logs and trees allowing for bass to hide. You'll have sand and gravel at the bottom where sturgeon will be scouring for their next meal. And tucked in here as well, you'll also find freshwater mussels, giant water beetles, and up on top of this log, a nice turtle as well. So being a junior ranger angler means not only protecting the fish, but also protecting these fish habitats for them as well. But now that we've learned about fish and fish habitats, we should talk a little bit about fishing. And we're going to just make it as simple as possible. We're going to break down our fishing gear into four main parts for us all. Number one is the rod. Similar to the fish, we can think of this as the vertebrae or the spine of the fishing rod. This holds everything together. It allows for the line to go from the reel, which allows for more line to go out or be brought back in. That line, which attaches to the reel and goes all the way down to either a hook or a lure. And there's lots of different types of hooks, lures, and bait you can use. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those a little later on. But if we remember your rod, your reel, your line, and a hook or lure, you pretty much have everything you need to go fishing. But Here in the upper Midwest of Minnesota and Wisconsin, there's a few different types of fishing we have. We just got done with winter, but during winter, it's hard to find places where you can fish because it's all frozen over. So we do ice fishing. And ice fishing is very fun. It can be cold, but it can also be challenging because rather than having a big open body of water to fish, we only have a hole about that big that we're fishing in. So we utilize different tools to help us know where the fish are, how deep the water is, and if there's any plants and vegetation growing at the bottom. So in this picture, I'm kind of holding on to this blue device here that has a wire going down into the hole. That allows us to know how deep the water is. If a fish were to swim by, you'll see a lot of different colors on that device showing, hey, there's a fish moving around, or hey, there's this movement that isn't moving too much, but it's just kind of swaying with the water. That could tell me that there's some plants down there and that fish may be hiding there. But because we're only fishing in that small hole, we don't need to cast, and our fishing rods are usually only a few feet long. For these, we usually will have a hook with a weight on it and some bait, like a worm or a waxworm. We'll drop that bait down into the hole and we do something called jigging. So you're just gently moving your fishing rod up and down, allowing that bait to dance around in the water, hopefully allowing a fish to come up and grab onto it. If you do catch that fish and you reel it in, we do want to remember that fish need that water to get oxygen to their gills. So we can bring it up to the surface, gently take the hook out, and then help get it sit comfortable back in the water. So what we'll do is we'll hold that fish down in that hole, waiting for it to get its strength back and swim off on its own. Sometimes the water is actually warmer than the air outside. So we want to make sure we do this fairly quickly, but also safely so that we don't hook ourselves or we don't hurt the fish. As we're slowly warming up and all the ice has melted off our lakes and rivers, we can start to move into fishing in ponds and lakes, where we can find a fishing pier and be able to cast off into that water. This pond in the image has lots of vegetation and plants growing along the sides of it. Great places for these fish to be able to hide and feel safe. This picture shows 3 people fishing, and they're using push button rods. So there's a few different types of fishing rods that we like to use. One's push button. That one has a button you press down, which allows for that line to be released. So if you were utilizing a push button rod, you'd hold it, press the button down, slowly go back to aimed at about 10 o'clock. So if you think of a clock, 10 o'clock, and as you move it forward to 2 o'clock on a clock, you'll let go of that button. I always like to think you're giving a thumbs up as you throw it forward, allowing your bait to fly off into the lake or river, where it could either float there with a bobber or you reel it back in. You might be an experienced angler and maybe have used a spinning rod before. These are rods that take a little bit more time to get used to. There's this metal bar right here that called a bail. You can flip that up and that allows the line to go out. And if you flip it back, you can then reel that line back in. So for these, you would, with your hand, hold the rod, and with your pointer finger, hold the line to the rod. You'll open that bail up, and as you're going from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, I always like to think you're pointing where you want to cast your bait. That allows for that line to be released from your finger and that bait to fly off into the distance. But along the riverway, we also see a different type of fishing, a type of fishing that almost looks like someone's dancing around, and that's fly fishing. They don't have a button. There's no bail to open or close. This utilizes your movement and the momentum of the fly, so the lure you have at the end, going back and forth. Here's a nice kind of diagram of how it works. So this angler is moving back and forth, and in doing so, the fly or the lure at the end is utilizing its weight, going forwards and backwards. And you can also see his other hand pulling line out, allowing for that lure to go farther or closer, depending where he's trying to cast it to. So we have a lot of different types of fishing, whether it's fishing in a river, fly fishing, lake fishing, pond fishing. And for us, we don't have any salt water around here, so we're not doing any ocean fishing or surf casting. But if you ever get a chance to go out and explore along the ocean, there's a whole different way to go fishing in those areas. But we also need to talk about what types of lures and bait to use. We like to start people who are just learning about fishing off with a bobber, a weight, and a hook. This, you can cast it out into a lake or a river, and you're watching that bobber. That bobber floats on top of the water, and the weight and the hook with the bait sink down below it. As you're watching the bobber, if it starts to go down and down and down, there's a good chance that there's a fish attached to it, and you can reel it in. But for fishing for other types of fish, maybe it's fly fishing. And trout like to eat insects. So you want your fly or your lure to look like those insects. People have different devices to be able to tie and create their own flies. They can make it look like an ant, a grasshopper, a dragonfly, or a moth. And these use that fly rod kind of movement going back and forth as it's coming over the top of the water and maybe just touches down very briefly. That trout might jump up thinking it's a grasshopper, grab that fly, and be hooked for you to bring it back in. When we think about the muskie, that big predator fish, those fish have large stomachs. They can eat fish about half their size. And because they eat other fish, you want a lure that might look like a fish. So some people will use giant lures. You don't need a giant lure to catch a big fish, but a lure that mimics or looks like another fish can trick the fish into biting it. So this is a big lure that kind of looks like the brook trout, that dark color on the outside, the yellowish orange belly on the underside. But this lure is about a foot long. That is pretty big. If you're looking for bass, we talked about they like to eat whatever they can. They're opportunistic. So they might eat frogs, a lure that skips along the top of the water like a frog. They might be at the bottom eating crayfish. So a lure that bounces along the rocks and the sand at the bottom of the river for that fish to be able to grab and eat. That would be a good bait for them. I always like to think if you're going fishing at a new spot, it's always smart to ask around. Other people fishing there, go to a bait shop or a fishing shop and ask, what should I use for this body of water to catch this type of fish? Because people like to help other folks out. And our last kind of main thing to talk about is fishing safety. And when we talk about safety, it's not just our safety, but it's also safety of the fish. I have a few different rules I always like to follow. I think it's always smart to fish with a friend. Could be an adult, could be another friend, but you should never go fishing alone. Bring a friend, share this hobby with them, and help each other out when you're out in the water. If you're going into the water, whether wading or in a kayak, canoe, or boat, always wear a life jacket. That life jacket can help just in case you spill overboard. You can still be above the water floating with the life jacket on. If it does get bad weather, so a storm's coming in, you may want to make sure you stop fishing right away. By holding onto that fishing pole, it's a giant rod sticking up into the air. It's not a safe way or a safe time to be fishing during a storm. And always have a first aid kit with you. When dealing with fishing, you have sharp hooks, there's fish with teeth, and you never want to get cut or hurt by these different items. Being careful around the fish and the equipment is really important, but always having that first aid kit is also important. And I mentioned before, it's not just about our safety, but also about the safety of the fish. When handling fish, you want to be sure that you're holding them a proper way, not bending them in different ways, and making sure that when you take them out of the water, it's for just a very short time to get the hook out, maybe take a photo before re-releasing them back into the water. So we've now covered what makes a fish, different types of fish that live here at St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, different fish habitats, fishing in different areas and different types of fishing, and lures. So the only thing left for us to do is for us to be sworn in as junior ranger anglers. So I'll give you a second to get set up, but I'd like all students to sit up straight, raise your right hand, and you are going to repeat after me. As a junior ranger angler, I promise to protect St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. I will respect fish and fish habitats, and I will listen to my teachers. Congratulations. You are all now official junior ranger anglers. I hope you all are encouraged and excited to go out and fish, even if you've never fished before. It's a fun hobby to have. You get to spend time outside in nature with friends and family. You get to learn about different wildlife and different environments, and you get to explore new places. So I'm going to open it up. If you all have any questions, I'd love to have answer them for you. Just send them in the chat. Thank you so much.
Wonderful presentation, Mike. Thanks for sharing. And I'll let you know that in the office, we're also all junior ranger anglers now. So thank you.
Was my timing good? I
It was
I
perfect.
wasn't sure the Paul. Okay, good.
Yeah. So you do have a few questions in the chat. Um,
Yeah.
we have a fifth grade class who's curious on what is the biggest fish you've ever caught?
Ooh, so I used to work at Cape Cod National Seashore, and there we did classes with people where we did surf casting. So that's sitting on a beach and trying to cast into the big waves as they came down. And there I caught a striped bass that weighed about 18 pounds and was probably about that big. It was one of the biggest fights a fish had ever pulled or put up for me. And that was one of the biggest ones I've ever caught.
Gotcha. Um, how thick should the ice be to ice fish?
You got it. So when talking about safety and fishing, ice fishing is one that we want to be extra safe for. So a rule of thumb is 4 inches of ice is safe for a human or a person to walk on. The more ice you have, the safer it is for different types of equipment. When you get to about a foot thick of ice, you'll start to see cars out there. If you get to 14 inches of ice, you'll see trucks out there. And for us, most of the ice fishing programs we did this winter, we were somewhere between 18 inches and 25 inches of ice, which is safe, but it's still, you'll hear the ice crack. It's a little bit spooky, but at the same time, it's a great way to get out and enjoy those cold days when there's always fish to be caught.
Yep. Yeah, nothing quite like the lake singing at you.
Yeah.
Why did brook trout evolve to have polka dots?
I saw that question pop up and I don't have a good answer. I will try to look it up and we'll get an answer for the class that wants to know it. But anytime I look at trout, whether it's rainbow trout, brown trout, or brook trout, they all have very unique color patterns, and a lot of fish have different patterns. We looked at the muskie or the muskellunge, and those are fish that have these vertical or up and down stripes to them. But we also have fish we call tiger muskies, which is a hybrid fish between a pike and a muskie. And their
Oh,
stripes are kind of angled or the opposite way. So each fish has different types of patterns for camouflage. But the blue and red dots, I don't know if that would be good camouflage for an area that's green and brown.
okay. Well, we can always look it up ourselves too if we're
Yeah.
really curious. Yeah. We have a ton of great questions coming in, so I'm going to keep them coming. What is the best lure to use for bass fishing?
Well, it really depends who you ask. And it depends what type of fishing you want to do. So some people really enjoy fishing what we call top water, meaning your lure is on top of the water. That frog that I showed hops on top. And when doing that, the bass will actually jump out of the water in order to strike that lure. It's a very exciting way to fish, and people like doing that. But it also means sometimes the fish misses and you might not catch it. That crayfish lure that bounces at the bottom and is a little bit slower moving. Doing that, you're a little bit more patient. And if a fish picks it up, you generally have a good chance of catching it. But it's all user choice. I always like to stop at a place that sells fishing equipment near the place I want to fish and ask, what's the best lure I should use for the Namakakan River, for this lake, for this pond? Because the people who live right there usually know what's best. But there's many different lures you can use.
Gotcha. What is your favorite fish?
Oh, I showed it a lot in this presentation. The red horse is one of my favorite fish. I don't usually fish to try to catch those fish, but it's the fish that is an indicator species. It's a fish that only lives in unpolluted waters because it's very sensitive. And along our riverway, we'll paddle the Namakagon, and I'll look down and you'll see hundreds of them from this big to that big swimming all over the place. And it just lets me know that the river I'm in right now is an unpolluted water system. It's clear and it's very beautiful. So I like the red horse.
I do too. I do enjoy seeing it when we're paddling.
Yeah,
When can you fish, and are there certain dates for certain fish?
exactly. So the big thing with fishing is knowing the rules and regulations. So if you're in Minnesota, Minnesota has its own set of rules and regulations, seasons or time of year you're allowed to catch and keep different types of fish. And Wisconsin is the same way. So rather than me trying to go over all the rules and regulations, we always like to say, make sure you're checking with the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, for Minnesota or Wisconsin, whichever state you're in. If you are 16 years or older, you do need a fishing license. So for a lot of you fourth graders, you're in luck. You don't need a fishing license, but make sure your parents do when going out fishing.
Yeah. Does the vegetation in the water, like seaweed, give off gases that are useful to the fish?
Yes. So when we do fishing programs, especially ice fishing programs, we like to tell students, and we'll bring out an underwater camera. One of the things we're looking for is vegetation. So grasses, different plants growing under there, because during the winter, there's not a lot of movement going along around underwater. So the main source of oxygen is coming from those plants, meaning that if fish want to get that oxygen through the water over their gills, they're going to be hanging out in those plants quite a bit. So not only is it food for some of them, but it also allows them to get oxygen too.
Yeah, and they can hide in it too, which is always nice. Are there rare fish that live in the St. Croix River?
There is. So we have a few different species that are rare, but one that comes to mind is one of our aquatic biologists who works here. She's giving a presentation, I believe, tomorrow about mussels, but she sent us a picture the other day of a paddlefish. It's a fish we don't see very often, but if you think of a fish with a big paddle-like nose, that's a paddlefish. It's one I've never caught, but one that I just snapped a photo of a few days ago, so I didn't have time to add it to the presentation, but it's a really unique and cool looking fish.
Yeah, if anyone goes to the Minnesota State Fair, I think they had a paddlefish in the DNR pound this year. How deep in the water are bass and muskie?
Yeah, so both fish can be at the bottoms, both fish can be up in shallow areas. It really depends on kind of the body of water they're in. So when we're at the St. Croix River, there is areas that get 20 feet deep, very deep, where we could see those muskie or bass lower down. But those same fish will travel upstream into the Namakagon. The Namakagon's only a few feet deep. So if you're in 4 feet of water, I can look down and see a muskie or sea bass. And those same fish might be found in 20, 30 feet deep water later on. So it really depends on the time of year, the water temperature, and what types of structure. So plants and logs and branches that are in the water that they can hide in.
Yeah. Okay, we have two more. Oh, I guess three more. Have you ever caught a northern? And what is the biggest fish you've caught ice fishing?
I have caught a northern. I think the biggest northern I caught was like 27 inches long. I always like to think of them like the snake of fish because they're really elongated. They're quick and fast ambush predators, but they do have teeth. This past winter, when ice fishing, we actually caught a few different northern pike. We caught northerns with a lot of kindergartners when we were fishing, and we caught a northern pike with a bunch of fourth graders too. And luckily, those were smaller northerns because otherwise, those fish might have been bigger than the students that we caught them with. Ice fishing, I have caught some lake trout before up at Lake of the Woods, and those are some big fish. I don't think we measured them because I was too cold and a little bit tired at the time when we were catching them because it was about 4 in the morning when we were catching those.
Your favorite way to fish?
Ooh, I like fly fishing a lot. When I was younger, I read a book called A River Runs Through It, and then they made a movie with Brad Pitt, and it was a really artistic way of fishing as you're moving and kind of uh, getting that lure, that fly to the correct spot. So it's always a neat, almost dance you get to do while fishing.
Yeah. Okay, and we have one more come in. So how long do fish need to be to keep them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, different species of fish have different sizes. You might hear the term slot limit. So, a fish like a bass might need to be 14 to 15 inches long in order to keep it, when a trout maybe only needs to be about 8 to 10 inches long. Each state has different rules and regulations, and those are put into place to make sure that we don't take all the big fish out and we don't have more fish being bred and reproduced later on. So these size limits have a lot to do with making sure we always have these fish for the next generations to be able to enjoy fishing too.
Okay, we have 2 minutes for two questions. Are you ready?
Yeah,
Do you have a favorite fishing pole?
I do. I have a very old plastic, very inexpensive fishing pole that my grandfather gave me, and I like it because he used to call it the ugly stick. And it's never broken. I've had it with me since I was 12 years old, but the name ugly stick is just kind of sticks with me.
Wonderful. And what is your favorite lure to use?
So if I'm fishing on a pond or a lake, I really like to use what they call a spinner bait. As you cast it out, it has blades on it that spin in the water, and it kind of makes a fun noise like I can't do it as it moves through the water. I'm not the best at fishing with it. I don't catch many fish with it, but it's just amusing as I'm out there casting it around.
Yeah, you got to entertain yourself somehow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has any other questions, you're more than welcome to email me and I will make sure Ranger Mike gets them. If anyone's interested in getting Junior Ranger badges, also please reach out. I have a good connection with Ranger Mike, so we can make sure those get to the classrooms they need to get to.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone so much for hanging out with us to learn and to be a Junior Ranger angler. And I hope you stick around. In about 10 minutes. We'll hear from a professional angler and how fishing impacted his life.
Thank you, everyone.